Hello, friends. Thank you for joining our call today. We're really excited to have you here and be in a conversation with our amazing guest presenters, Alita and Halee. As we get started, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Christine, Farmer Education Coordinator at Michael Fields, and I'm going to run through a quick introduction before we pass the baton to our friends. So, we're really excited to have you on our final webinar of our staple crop series this year. Language access is really critical to the success that we do together, both on our farms and in our community. So just a reminder that as you join today, if you're you or a producer you work with could benefit from language support or interpretation services on these educational calls or in events, please let us know when you RSVP or by sending me an email. It's also critical to our programming, and our partner leads are committed to and inviting all of participants today and in these conversation spaces to hold the following community guidelines. Please put relationships first, practice trust and respect privacy, create space for multiple truths and norms, notice power dynamics or step up and step back when you need to, and finally, stay grounded in our common goals. So if you are new to this conversation, we have been chatting with farmers across the Midwest about staple crops and what it means to grow them in their farm or garden business. A staple crops doesn't have a universal definition. So where we start is a place of crops that provide foundational food and bring dense caloric and nutritional value to our kitchens. Staple crops can also have inherent characteristics that enable extended storage or have broad distribution ability. A lot of these crops are vital for enhancing food security and fostering the economic stability within the agricultural communities we live and work in. So when we talk about staple crops, some could include grains, legumes or beans, other pulses, starchy root and tuber crops, and some pseudo cereals and oil seeds. The most important thing of this conversation, though, is that we know a food that is a staple to one person, family, or community could be different to the next person or community. So we're really excited to welcome you to learn about what crops you regard as staples and how we can support you in producing them at your farms. So as a welcome, we're going to ask that you please use the chat today. Pop in where you're calling from, or your name, where you're calling from, and any curiosities that you might have about these staple crops that we're talking about. In addition, I would love to introduce our project partners, Hagen with Michigan Food and Farming System, Fresh with Fresher Together and the Chicago Bread Club, and Stephen at Fondy Food Center and Farm in Milwaukee. If you have any questions about any of this programming that we talk about today or beyond, you can always reach out and send us a note. So without further ado, I'm super pleased and excited to introduce Alita Kelly and Halee Curtis. They're going to introduce themselves and prime us for a really great conversation to think about food production for staple crops in the form of collaboration. So Alita and Halee, please take it away.
Thank you. And thank you so much for inviting us to be here today about this critical topic when it comes to sustainable farming, just collaboration. So I'm happy to see where everybody's coming from. I see Southwest Michigan, Detroit in the chat. So keep adding in your name, your location, pronouns, and we'd really love to hear what's your biggest frustration or fear about partnering on farm projects. So I know there's probably many of them, but just give us one big one to chew on so we can explore those fears together and come up with some solutions. Trust. Time consuming. Yes, the classics, the major ones, right? All right. Haley, do you want to get us started with our land acknowledgement?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everyone, also. But yeah, before we begin our work together, I want to take a meaningful pause to acknowledge that we are gathering virtually in I was more at the Lakes region, virtually on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe people, including Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations. We honor their enduring stewardship and deep spiritual connection to this land and water that now sustains our farming communities and this very conversation. And I can
Thank you
hand
for
it over
that.
to you. Yeah.
All right. So I'll get started with a quick intro. My name is Alita Kelly. I am based in West Michigan, and I've had the honor of working on several collaborations. That is critical and foundational in my work. I got started, well, I actually had a catering business before the market, but I started a grocery store that you may have heard of in Grand Rapids called Southeast Market. We worked with over 200 farms and food vendors, local farms and food vendors. So lots of collaboration there. I'm working on two farm collectives, one in Manistee, Michigan, an apple orchard, and a new farm collective project, 20 acres in South Haven, Michigan, along with Halee. I sit as the chair for the West Michigan Young Farmers, where we have the West Michigan Farmer of Color Land Fund and a Freedom School, among other things. And my business consultancy and agriculture development firm, Jade Rabbit. We work through several collaborations, mainly through farm to school and supporting schools across the state in collaboration with the Michigan Department of Education to help our kids eat better. Honored to be here today.
Yeah, and I can do my quick intro. My name is Haley. My pronouns are they, them. I've been a community organizer for over a decade, a circle keeper, conflict transformation specialist, and my values and politics are really rooted in restorative and transformative justice and anti-racist Black queer feminisms and transnational feminisms. So, with a lot of emphasis on conflict and resolution, honestly. And yeah, Alita actually brought this quote in from Fannie Lou Hamer, and I just really love it. When you have 400 quarts of greens and gumbo soup canned for the winter, no one can push you around or tell you what to say or do. And yeah, we got some love there. Um, I just really love this quote about, the freedom and power of nourishing your community and yourself. And with that kind of power and freedom, it almost always comes collaboratively. And yeah, that's why we're here today. And I'm just really happy to be here and to talk about these things with y'all.
Thank you. So, yeah, that quote really gets to the why of this work, and it's about food sovereignty, it's about self-determination, it's about sustainability. And like Haley mentioned, those things really come into fruition when you collaborate effectively. So, let's get into the how because it's not really a why. People don't want to do things on their own. We are generally community minded, focused. And now that we live in a society where there's really been a drive and marketing, I'll say, for us to be individuals and operate in a very individualistic way. it's almost like we have to get back to learning where we came from and how we've always sustained our communities, and that's by working together. So today we're going to dive into some practical tools to make collaboration smoother and more joyful. And so you're going to walk away with strategies, a partnership checklist, and decision-making frameworks, as well as a contract template to build that confidence and be a better collaborator within farm projects. So there's many benefits to collaboration, sustainable work. We have an epidemic of burnout amongst our people. And so we need to figure out how to sustain this work. It allows for more creativity and to have more robust and impactful projects. It's more fulfilling to work with other folks, and you're more likely to be funded, and that's always helpful. And yeah, it's just increasingly important as we get back to community-based living.
All right. And yeah, so I think the care, what we were talking about is really the headache. And, I think in the chat we had a few, yeah, pa projects past funding, navigating accountability, generative conflict resolution. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, foundational issues. There's a lot of headaches that come with collaboration. And I do feel like a lot of those are, fears and frustrations around miscommunication. Like Alita was saying, burnout and stalled projects. And, it really does make the work feel draining. And it's not an if, but a when. And that's why we have the care, the solution to the headache, the remedy, which um, are some tools that we're going to bring and maybe some real life examples that we're excited to share. But some of the tools that we're going to talk about is starting your project with value aligned people and entities, community building, just those foundational practices, establishing shared values and agreements, which is one of my favorite parts. And finally, deep listening, proactive conflict transformation. And then, underneath all of this, though, is the principle that you must move at the speed of trust. And yeah, I'm really excited to talk about all these wonderful examples with y'all today. And, this all begins with people. And that's our next slide. It's about community building, the human factor. So, the strength of any project truly comes from the strength of relationships. This is a non-negotiable. We good vibes are such a great initial connection is so important, but there definitely needs to be more than just having that connection before starting something together or as you're starting something together. We need to know how we work. We need to know how we make decisions, and learn each other's different work styles and capacities. And yeah, I think Alita is gonna talk a little bit more about that.
Yes, so really it's ideal to be in relationship with the people that you're going to be collaborating with ahead of some opportunity, or there's a grant that came through and now you're coming up with a project. I know a lot of times it does happen like that, and that might be when you first are meeting someone and you're first starting to really work with them. But ideally, it's important to think long term, um, always, and have that long strategic visioning kind of always flowing, and think about who you feel you could work well with, even if the opportunity hasn't arisen yet. But when you're in that space, what's super important when you're in the space of it, starting a project and collaborating with others, what's really important is to come up with a decision-making process. Because when things get hard, you're going to want to come back to what you've decided on, and it removes the pressure on any one person. So successful collaborations are where there's clarity around decisions, and there's accountability to how those decisions are made. And so we're going to be sharing out more about different decision-making frameworks and giving you some concrete tools to kind of review the different decision-making frameworks that there are out there. But I wanted to start with that because collaborating means making a lot of decisions together.
All right.
So
Oh, sorry.
it's okay. So that relationship, that human factor, it's really about knowing each other's stories, strengths, and struggles, because that's how you build trust. And so making time for that ahead of getting started, hitting the ground running on which crops are being planted and, all of those the logistical things, is just super important. And I was speaking to a beautiful human, Kofi, who is up in Grand Traverse with their conservation district and has started an incubator farm. I was learning from him, and one thing that really stuck with me about our conversation is that if you can't call someone in the middle of the night, then it's likely not going to be a fruitful collaboration. And that's the level of trust that you need to have with folks if you're really looking at sustainable projects, deeply impactful projects. So that doesn't just happen overnight. It comes with years of pouring into one another.
Okay. Um, yeah, we're talking about that longevity, which it does take time to build that kind of community. And I think some helpful mind shift practices, like when we're collaborating together, is really moving from the initial like transaction, kind of coming from this like what Alita was saying, individualistic place to this mind shift change of transformation, like um, you know, instead of like, yeah, the transaction, you do this, I do that, to this transformational shift of we're building this something meaningful together. And, how do we do that as a collective? And I really like this African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And yeah, it just really speaks on that longevity and what that looks like if you do want to go far, sometimes collaboration isn't gonna be like 50-50, life happens, there's a sick child, broken tools, a personal struggle, grief takes time. And so that ratio really has to be able to flex, and this isn't a failure, this is just reality of life. And you must prepare, to both offer that grace, but I do think it's really important to know that you need to be able to receive it, because community building is the core of preventing those headaches. Like we said earlier, most conflicts, and like what we were seeing in the chat too, come up from unmet needs, that miscommunication, that lack of trust. And so we must like move at the speed of trust, practice that regular communication so there's a flow before issues arise, and also be able to really um, express our needs and practice that muscle of sharing kind of that vulnerable yeah, sharing your vulnerable feelings, which can be scary for some, for me. But um, also with community building, it happens through hardships. It happens through celebrating one another, showing up consistently. You know, this is where trust and communication and commitment really grows, which builds community. And, another really big important part of building community is that, all work and no play isn't conducive to authentic relationship building, which isn't good for the project. So, whatever that looks like for y'all, like even during project time, it is important to have that time for play and that time for fun with one another, because conflicts are going to rise, tensions are going to rise, and we need to have all of the tools in our toolbox of being together. And yeah, so with that, me and Alita wrote some real life tips that can help facilitate some community building. And
Hold on, I want to uplift something in the chat right
oh,
now.
okay.
Christine says, "I'm curious about the strain that collaboration can bring into strong relationships and how you can protect that when business enters the mix. And that is so true and real. And I think what Halee just was speaking to is how you protect that. And it's not just about work, work, work. It's about making time to center what the relationship was like even before you got into this project. And so even though you might have this outline of like, this project's going to take 100 hours, the truth is it's going to take 150, 200 hours because you have to manage those relationships. And and you have to keep revisiting how important the relationship is. It can't just be something that's assumed. You have to share that with one another and make time to talk about things that are going on in each other's lives, not just what's going on in the project. Sometimes, usually when we get started with the West Michigan Young Farmers, our check-in lasts like an hour and a half before we even start doing business. And it just makes the business side feel so much more enjoyable because we are in authentic relationship. We know what everybody's going through. We kind of are already trying to figure out, we're already able to figure out who's working at max capacity and who's not. And so that helps to frame the conversations moving forward about the work because it's rooted in the reality of where everyone is. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah. Um, Also with that question, it brings up, which we're going to talk about later, these values, and with values come like these boundaries that we set with our time and our commitment. And we're only one person with very finite energy, and that's where like some of these core practices that we're sharing can really ground us and keep us. And we're going to talk more about that and values as well. But yeah, for community building, I mean, honestly, what Alita was just talking about, the first one is check-ins. That really holds us down. That has held me down in so many of my collaboration, like organizing work. Yeah, just the simple, how are you showing up today? Powerful. It's not just a chat. It's like you were talking about, a strategic tool to know someone's like and provide immediate context for someone's capacity. And yeah, to also like how they're feeling today. If they almost got into a fender bender, they're feeling really activated, those cortisol levels are rising. Like, what can I do to hold calm, comforting space for them? How am I going to move with them today? So yeah, I think it allows us to assign tasks with empathy, and that is just such a big and important, um, yeah, thing to know every day, anytime we're showing up together. Yeah, so
Yes, so emotional wellness is super important, and not just having wellness, but emotional tools are super important. So when we think about like professional development, we're thinking about so many other things, but knowing how to communicate with empathy and compassion is critical. And it's probably one of the biggest tools or the most important tools in not just having a project, but completing a project, sustaining a project that feels good, that isn't draining to you, something that you are excited to work on versus something that you have to do. Um, so yes, those emotional tools, like Haley's speaking about, like having a successful check-in, what does that look like? You're gonna have to sharpen your communication skills. You're gonna have to sharpen your patience skills, your listening skills, a lot of things. But then there's also the accountability tools that kind of keep the project on track. And so we need those too, both the emotional and these kind of more like cold, I'll say, more cold tools, such as project management software, having contracts, even if they're not legal contracts, having something that kind of lays out the framework of the project and that everybody signs is powerful. There's power in putting your name on something. Having shared notes with timelines. There's a lot of ways to create systems and structures to keep everyone accountable. And as a project manager, I love these things, specifically because it takes the pressure off of that one person, and it kind of puts everything into a place that everyone on the project can look at. So it's not like I'm telling you what to do. It's like we decided on this and it's over here living, and everybody can review it when they want. Deciding how to communicate and not just what to communicate is really important. So, picking a shared lane, whether that's we are going to have a group text or we're going to be in an email, or we're in a phone call every other week. So miscommunication often comes from mixed platforms and not mixed intentions. So if someone on the project really prefers text, but then someone else is in the email and things were said in the email and there's no context to it in the text, now we're not working with the full set of info. And maybe that led to people's feelings getting hurt. And now the work isn't happening as it's supposed to because the trust has been broken. You see where there's a cascading effect, and it all came from we were just not in the same lane as far as our communication channel. So my suggestion is pick a communication channel and stick to it. And it might not be the one that you would have preferred that is used, but there's always some give and take when it comes to collaboration too. So yes.
All right. Yeah, and we have a normalizing a healthy no or not right now. I mean, this is truly like an act of love for the project because it protects the project from the toxicity of a resentful yes. And yeah, it keeps it real, which keeps it sustainable. Like we're, talking about longevity of a project. So, it's healthy and important to have a no when you know you can't. And yeah, I th also think that's important to make sure you're checking in with yourself. And sometimes, we say yes, we didn't, and we need to know that, oh, actually, I can't do this project at least by myself. Like I need more support. Just it is, yeah, important to share that, to share those needs, and um, yeah,
Also, I want to acknowledge that it's really hard for us to say no, for a lot of us to say no, and you might need to practice in your mirror. You might need to practice thinking about someone that you really respect, you really love, and how you might say a lovingly no to them or a respectful no to them. No doesn't mean I don't like you or I don't like this project. It just means that you are respecting your boundaries and your capacity, and it's okay. We need to get used to it.
yeah, I love that. That's really important. And so like our next one is rotate leadership. Honestly, I think this is the way to go. This is like for longevity, at least. Like maybe some short-term projects, sure, we can have like one leader, but rotating leadership really decentralizes the power. It deepens that shared ownership of a project and it allows the strengths of each person to shine through and prevents burnout from either one person because that hierarchy for a long time can have some rigidity and some uh yeah, some burnout and resentment on both sides, honestly. Um, and yeah, that's yeah. But you'll decide together what looks best for you. I think rotating leadership is a good one to think about while you're building community and building these projects. But I feel like you know, figuring out how we intentionally build this like foundation of community building, what this starts with. And I already saw like in the chat um, that, gaining commitment and keeping up the momentum beyond a project, beyond the initial excitement of starting a project is, yeah, that's really hard. And also, yeah, signing something can be intimidating, but that's why we have our shared values. This is my favorite one. This really is where um, needs, fears, conflict transformation, how we all kind of comes together because our shared values are the important part of like how we're being with our people. So like our values are this collective compass, and it's where folks like when folks get lost or, you know, things are happening, it really brings us back together. It holds us, and yeah, it's a wonderful tool for conflict transformation that we're going to talk about later. But yeah, so when we start our um, values like in a group, I really think it's important to be like in person together, but you know, you can do it over Zoom. But yeah, this is almost kind of ritualistic. Like it's going to take time, and it's really about like introspection, because we're gonna come together and each person is going to answer this question of like what values are non-negotiable for us to work well together, and to feel comfortable with one another. And you know, some examples like we talked about trust, respect, we could do care for the land and its stewards. But what does that look like? So like after, you know, every per person, you know, states their values, they're also going to answer the question of, you know, what does that look like in action in this project specifically? Um, and so, yeah, for example, like trust, it could be like being consistent even when things get hard, like having to get up and show up for early morning chores. Yeah, even though it's super hard. But by doing that, it shows us that through our actions, like you can trust me. Um, so, you know, each person will go around, say their value, that action definition towards it, and each person has to agree to those. And I think that's a really important part. And maybe they'll even add on to it. Um, and I think with like Donna in the chat, like the excitement wears off and you know that fades. Our commitments, and kind of making it ritualistic, like even signing them, like that is what's grounding us and keeping us going. If we hold these like truly near and dear, um, yeah, it's such a catalyst for longevity. And like I know like when I've done my values and had to sign like sign underneath them, I felt this like burst of energy, like I'm ready to be here. So yeah, I love our shared values, and
And
yeah, I think
also it's important to, oh, excuse me.
oh no, it's all
You
right, go
good?
ahead.
Also, it's important to have those values visible. So after you've decided on these values and everybody's like, okay, we're all on the same page. Like if you are working in a space that has physical place, putting the values somewhere where you just are walking past this area and then you're reminded of the conversation of when you set your values and how things felt when you first got started and you were so hopeful and you know you really have to come back to those times, and in the absence of deciding on what your shared values are, a lot of assumptions will be made about what your shared values are and it will lead to problems. I'm saying this from experience. So, yeah, anytime I do work with any team, we always have make space, make a lot of time to decide on our values. And so you'll see in the little photo here on the slide that the strategic planning is right behind the hand. You have got to make time to strategic plan before you jump into a project, and that includes building those values. So, another way to keep values front and center is during meetings, any person can say, call out something that, whether it's a phrase like values check, or whatever your group wants to call it. If things are feeling off and you feel like we need to get regrounded in why we're all together, it's nice to have something that just lets the group know I want to be closer. I want to be more, I want to feel closer and more connected to you right now. And that looks like we need to revisit our values. And there's no shame or blame. It's just can we pause and come back together? So that's an important tool. But those small reflections lead to big prevention of resentment. So I just want to pause there and really soak that in because you really don't have time not to make time for this. So, yeah, I feel like we've said a lot about values, and I'm curious if there's anyone else on the chat, like in the chat, if you could respond there, who also operates like this. Like when you're getting started on a project, like have you gotten started with values, or do you feel like that's missing in this space of food systems, farm, collaborative projects? Right. There's always an assumption that we're aligned. Totally. And usually we are aligned on certain things, sustainable practices like for soil and water and like of course yes, definitely. But then there's these other things that we really need to talk about too. Okay, well, let's just leave that there as food for thought. And continue on. All right, so life throws curveballs at us. Think about the SNAP benefit pause. Think about COVID. When we're already in relationship with folks and we have solid values, we can swiftly meet the needs of our community. So this is another reason why it's important for us to be aligned because it's not just issues that will come up within the collaboration. It's all the issues that are surrounding us, things that we can't control. So it's really important for us to have great organizational and collaborative health as we move forward. Next, we're going to hear from Fresh, Fresh Robertson, about organizing during a curveball like COVID and collaborating through that wild ride.
Thanks. Um, yeah, so I think one of the stories I want to share today, or just about what we've been up to since 2020, has been one like an amazing collaboration, and all of this information that you've just shared. I kind of wish we had thought through some of these things. Some of these things kind of fell into place, and then some of them would be so helpful still to implement. So, in May of 2020, during the height of the pandemic, a group of us started a project called Farm Food Familias, which is a mutual aid kind of farm to table meals project where we were getting meals to people who um, were homebound, who needed food, a lot of elders and community members on the south side and west side of Chicago. And it started with um, a couple folks who were partners and organized together, and who we had been in a relationship with. Fresher Together had been in a relationship with one of them and doing a lot of organizing and having a lot of shared values with, who called us up and we're like, hey, we need to feed people. You know, can you, like, we have this grant money. We talked to the funder. We can repurpose it. Can we figure out how to make some meals every week? And they had also talked to another chef that they had a relationship with and that I didn't have a relationship with, but who all was in the same community. And so we did start from that place really of shared values. We had a lot of that already in common. We didn't do a lot of the sit down and strategic planning and thinking through it from the beginning, but it was something that, like, knowing that we've been building community together, some of us have been really kind of operating in community spaces and a lot of discussions and value sharing and collaborating are already doing projects together, that it was easy to like trust each other to kind of just be in action right away. And so we started, one of the things we did in that collaboration, which I think is really helpful, is that we started small. And so the first week we were serving folks, we were like, okay, let's get 50 meals out the door. You do 25, I do 25. We kind of figured out everybody had their lane, who was handling what. Everything was really transparent. And so we started with 25 each. We got those meals out the first week, and then we were like, okay, that worked. And then we iterated over it, right? So we didn't have a lot of time to do strategic planning in the forefront because we were like, okay, community members need to eat. Let's get food out. But we did have a lot of time to have discussions and meetings as we moved through. And so then the next week we were like, okay, let's do 50 each instead of 25 each. Let's do 50 each, and so we'll get 100 meals out. And so we did that until we were doing about 350 meals every week, and then bringing more people in. And so throughout the time where we started up until now, and definitely we've changed and switched and scaled back and done things over time. But we've got well over 50 some thousand meals out to community members by doing one cook day a week in collaboration, getting stuff from farms and that are growing that need to be used into the kitchen and able to get that out. And, it's been a really beautiful process. And some of the things that is really helpful, I think, in how we've been collaborating, how we're doing this work is definitely starting with like relationship to begin with and knowing each other that had us able to act fast and trust, because even though I might not have known all of us, then I trusted the people who I did know and had been building with to bring someone else in. And so over time, we did have like more meetings and discussion of values and discussion of thoughts and feedback and input and what we want to switch up. We would kind of at the end of each season kind of vision and reflect on what worked, what didn't work, what we want to do differently the next year. But one of the things that worked, especially for me as a person who often takes on a lot of everything and has my hand in all the different pots, was really being able to stay in my lane, right? And so it was like we knew what our roles were, right? Like I was not the one that was also harvesting, also delivering the food, also picking up rescue, or even getting the meals to community. I didn't have to be also the one calling up the neighbors to see what their dietary restrictions were. I didn't have to, we were able to use volunteers to do certain stuff. We were able to know who was coordinating which pieces. So I knew that I just needed to know, we're going to get this food from the farm. I'll take some food from my farm. I'm going to cook the meals, package the meals, tell people what I'm cooking so we can label them. And then people are going to divide them and make sure they get to all the different homes, right? And so it was really great to think about like how to collaborate where I can trust and like just take a step back from having to have my hands in everything to really like let go and to like kind of let everybody else show up in their spaces, right? And so that was, definitely work and a lot of stuff for me because it's hard. Like the type of person I am, it's hard to sometimes step back and let go. But that's, I think, what makes our stuff so beautiful, right? So when people ask me like during the height of it, it's like, oh, how do I get meals? It was like, oh, you know what? Let me pass you along to this person because I don't handle the list. I don't know if we're full. I don't, and it's very easy. Like if you think about like what people are doing and trusting people to be in their lane. And so for that too, it was because of those relationships that we had already built and how we were trying to maintain them and grow them. Everything wasn't about the organizing. It was also about socially gathering when it was safe to do so, or either gathering on Zoom, especially during the height of the pandemic. It was about like a lot of those different things too that help us like build that up. And then as we grew, right, because we went from starting with 2 chefs to then bringing in 2 more chefs. And at the height of it, we had 4 of us cooking. Then it was also kind of how to build like relationship and how to have trust and how to like have meetings and all of those things so that we can have input and see, and also that piece that was a small piece that you named, but it was so significant, the running notes, right, that everyone has access to, easy to go back to. That was like a piece from the beginning or some shared space where we can look at and see like, oh, okay, this is what's going on. Okay, we're raising money for community. This is who's given. Oh, here my friend gave. I can thank them on behalf, like just thinking through how to have like that visibility and transparency and like all of those things. And then there's definitely been tough times, right? And then like figuring out like we don't always have all the pieces, and some of this stuff that you have mentioned has been super great. But you know, we could be like, okay, let's have a conversation, let's get on a meeting. Do we need to talk through something and trying to like figure it out? And so that's been kind of ours, a little bit more agile. It would be nice to have the spaciousness to strategic plan like right up front and have a plan at the beginning. But we've kind of been like, we dove in and then kind of like iterated over it, and then then have made space for like, okay, do we need monthly meetings? Do we need like a big time where we all come together and break bread and just build relationship, and what that looks like over time?
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So many nuggets of wisdom in that story. You brought up so many great things, including we don't always have time to strategic plan. And but you didn't put it on the back burner. You brought it back, like you brought it back front and center when there was time, because we do have to be agile and address the community's needs as we see them and as they come up also. So I loved that. Um, Also staying organized, the importance of staying organized and having running notes. We have to archive our work for multiple reasons, really. One, for posterity, and also just to be able to share our notes with new collaborators that are coming in. We all don't have the best memories. I know I don't, and so we're definitely going to have notes. And most importantly, roles. Knowing what your role is, knowing what other people's role is, trusting them to live into what's attached to their role and not overstepping. And that's something that comes up in our partner checklist that you can use when you're entering partnerships and collaborations also. Thank you, Fresh.
Yeah, thank you so much, Fresh. And yeah, as the kind of the ending of talking about that foundational practice of values, I just wanted to say that, our values is an active form of care and intention and love, and it really does show us how we want to be with each other. And so yeah, that's just like an important, I think, little nugget to think about. And yeah, oh, this is one of my favorites. Like active listening, deep listening is such a wonderful tool. Um, but at least for me, it was pretty hard sometimes. Like deep listening is such a foundational practice and it takes such time and practice to do, as a radical act of respect and so much presence. It takes so much presence to really deeply listen, to have active listening. Um, but the goal of active listening is really just to understand the human being behind the words, their story, their needs, their why. It requires us to let go of our need to think of a response first. So some tips and tricks that have helped me with deep listening is looking out for response anxiety. So that pressure to respond immediately, give yourself that pause. Silence isn't empty. This is where reflection lives, and through a slow, thoughtful response is almost always better, guaranteed, than a fast reactive one. So, um, oh, this is one of my favorite great tips is like knowing the power of paraphrasing. This isn't copying. This is really to ensure that you see the person, you're seeing their perspective, you're seeing their world, right, through their eyes. This strengthens trust so much and prevents, I don't know, I feel like 99% of miscommunication. So even just like that simple, like what I'm hearing is, or let me see if I understand you, is such a good tool to have. Always helpful to keep in my back pocket. Um, and so yeah, active listening, I think why it takes a lot of time is because you're listening on two levels. You're trying to hear the unmet need and the feeling. So, for example, under, you know, I wasn't included. That might be hurt. That might be a need for belonging. And yeah, so it's important to ask as the listener, what is the person's need? What is the person's feeling behind what they're saying? And um, that's also why the power of paraphrasing comes in, and taking that time to respond. Okay, so the last, it's an oldie but a goodie, is asking what and how questions instead of why questions. So, for example, like why is like a why did you do that? Which can sound pretty accusatory. Uh, what we can do like a what question like what was going on for you there or how did you see that situation. Those what and how questions can really invite story sharing, which is what we're trying to get, versus like kind of triggering defensiveness with those like why accusatory types styles of questioning. So just those little tiny shifts can be so powerful when it comes to like deep listening. And Alita, I think you have some pretty good examples of the importance of active listening too.
Yeah, one example that I wanted to share before we create some space to hear from all of you. We had more to talk about, but I really want to make space for that before we wrap up. Um, so when we got started with in the West Michigan Young Farmers chapter, we wanted to build the land fund, which if you're not familiar with it, we were really just taking notes from the Detroit's Black Farmer Land Fund and it's a mutual aid project where we get fundraise money to give cash awards to farmers to acquire land. And why that's important is a whole other webinar, right? But like I'm assuming that you probably know why. And so what we did was a community listening session, and the goal in that was really to find out how we should go about building our land fund, but we weren't clear and we should have been more clear. And what ended up happening was some farmers in the listening session thought that we were fundraising only and specifically for them. Now you can imagine how messy that was after the money started coming in, and we had these big goals of having an application where we would be able to give the money out to several different farmers, right? And so the learning opportunity there was don't make assumptions, be really listening to what people are saying and finding for what's behind the words that they're using and asking questions to make sure that you're all on the same page. It was one of the biggest learning opportunities of my life. And I'm grateful that, we've overcome all of those issues, but just a reminder for how important it is to be active listening and getting really clear about communicating the why of what you're doing and how it's going to look. So, yeah, I know Haley, we had some other slides I want us to kind of fly through.
Yeah.
Proactive conflict transformation, really being proactive so that you're not dealing with issues later. It's efficient for your project. And so that looks like focusing on your values as the guide. And it's not about who's right, but what's needed. So there needs to be just a lot of grace. We're dealing with humans. We are deeply flawed, all of us. And so making space for that and celebrating one another for what we do right and how we do show up well is really important.
Yeah, can I
Okay.
just add real quick?
Yeah.
Conflict transformation. What's really, kind of the epitome of like what we're talking about, like the headaches when conflict arise. This is kind of those things. So like just an example, like if I'm feeling or like there's tension and I'm starting to feel activated, we can go like, hold on, I'm feeling this tension. Maybe we can like go back to our values and start sharing our feelings, or where did we drift from our values? Like what can we learn from this moment? And yeah, like you were saying, it stops the who's right to try to find what's underneath that. And yeah, so the goal isn't really just to fix the problem, but kind of strengthen that web of connection to make, you know, us more resilient for the next challenge. Um, and yeah, like those are the ultimate practices like you were sharing earlier. And that's it. I just wanted to add that little tidbit.
Thank
So
you.
thank you.
I'm not going to recap. Sorry, fam. So with the last few minutes that we have, I'm so grateful that we were brought to speak on this topic. We have a lot of experience, but we're not experts. I think we're experts when we combine all of our wisdom. And so I just want to hold some space here, if we have time, to just share some of the things that you all have learned within your collaborative projects. So feel free to come off mute and just jump into different practices, lessons, tools that you have to collaborate effectively.